Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. Need to get a motion to go into 78th special session, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Special session, first item on the agenda is the approval of resolution to establish a Hagerstown Youth Advisory Council Partner Group.
Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for the mayor and city council to approve a resolution to establish a Hagerstown Youth Advisory Council Partner Group Ad Hoc Committee. The goal of the partner group is to assist with the review of applications and serve as mentors and advisors to the Hagerstown Youth Advisory Council throughout the program year.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Approval of Police Department annual payment for wages to 911 Center, Washington County Treasurer for $405,630.
Mayor, this is a point of order. Do we have to take this off the table before we can have a,
Yes, yes.
Yes, and the motion was never made, so the motion would have to be made then, so you need to take it off the table.
Right.
And then.
so I'd move to remove that from the table.
So moved. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Yeah. Back to the motion of the approval of Police Department annual payment for wages to 911 Center, Washington County Treasurer, $405,630.
As another point of order, if someone makes a motion and someone seconds it, neither of those two individuals can vote against it, correct?
I don't think that's,
I believe they can vote against it, but they can't speak against it.
Yes,
Is what I think the rule is.
I believe that's true.
I think they cannot speak
Yes.
against it, but they can vote against it.
In the discussion.
Yes. You can't make a motion to do something and then immediately start saying why you should be opposed to it. Mr. Mayor, I hereby move for mayor and council approval to reimburse Washington County government for the Hagerstown portion of communications dispatching the amount of $405,630. This is the amount agreed upon based upon the cost sharing formula. At the time of consolidation, the city agreed to pay the county an annual sum equal to 85% of the salary of the 11 city employees on their last day of city employment.
Second.
Okay, now it's time for the discussion. Who wants to go first?
The floor is yours.
I mean, I'm gonna make a couple of comments. You know, I've been asked a number of times from staff and others, sort of, what's the recollection of this, the deliberations on how we got to that number. And as I explained, in my responses, at the time I happened to be county commissioner, I remember having those discussions, at least one of those discussions, and attending one, as part of the county in the Burhan's room at that time. And my recollections during then were that because of the changeover and because of the differences largely of those city employees having the ability to work within the city union contract, of having the differential on the benefits level, and not so much the salary, that this was one of the ways to reach some compromise. But as I explained in my response, I was under the impression it was for those employees. In other words, the 11 transfer, as they sort of
Attritioned
retire
out.
or
Yep.
move on, or attrition over
Yep.
time, that
I concur.
it would slowly, dwindle down. And, I think, the politicians sort of left it at that point and said, okay, that's where we'll go. The staff that worked through that, I think, most of them have moved on since that time, and it didn't seem to go in that direction. So, for me, there's one of two things. You either review that information and go, okay, you know, here were the parameters of how that relationship was established, and you return to those parameters, or you forgo those parameters and say, you know what, we'll just keep paying the wrong amount. It reminds me a little bit of when the state a few years back from the comptroller's office said, hey, everybody, just want to let you know, we did the income tax, a little bit incorrectly over the last period of time, and we're gonna go back over that period and recollect that overage. I think for me, I'm not even asking that as a council member. All I'm saying is that we abide now that we've done this research by the terms of that agreement at that time, and based on the figures that the county sent over, if the figure for those remaining employees, about half of which have gone, have now moved on to other positions, the understanding is we were never going to be obligated to sort of fill that position indefinitely. And so if you look at the number, I think it was like 261,000, you do 85% of that and it's like 222,000. That to me is where you start, because those were the terms of the agreement that occurred. And yeah, I guess we can sit here and point fingers and say shame on everybody for not sort of, getting that report and doing those numbers year by year and seeing how that attrition occurred over time. But that's the figure. And, as much as everybody would like to say, well, this is a completely isolated item, separate from the significant volume of conversation ongoing among, fire rescue, EMS safety altogether, it's hard to say that in this seat when not only are you paying and continuing to pay more than what you obligated to do so, but you're continually over those same number of years receiving what I think is arguably an inequitable stake in those distribution of county resources to those facets of your operation, being your city fire stations and those operations. And somebody could sit here and say, okay, well, the reality is you got two folks over at the 911 center that appear to be designated, for calls to the city. But when you go back to those parameters, and I remember those conversations clearly, I remember going over to the 911 center as a commissioner and hearing everybody's going to be cross-trained. Calls are calls in the county. It doesn't really matter where they originate. Nobody's going to Boonesboro and saying, well, 12% of the calls originate in Boonesboro. Boonesboro, where's your 12%? And so I don't think that can be our starting point. At some point, we've got to bring this conversation to the table and say, not only where is the fairness, but when are we going to abide by, those facets? And I get it, 40% of the calls happen in the city, but that's the service that was provided. And if we're paying 85% 11 people, but only 2 are designated to the city, but 40% of the calls come into the city, then the argument is the opposite. We're actually paying more than that service level we're receiving.
May I suggest that an appropriate solution to this conundrum for the immediate future may very well be for someone to move to amend this motion and put in the amount that Kristen is indicating is due and payable under the agreement as he understands it. And we would certainly have more time after that then to discuss further how we resolve the ultimate issue. But it would allow us to stand by the agreement that was made and not be zeroed out and still have open discussions about what we need to do.
Well, I'll just add that, remember, this is for fiscal year 19, which ended July 1st of 2019, not the coming fiscal year that everybody's in right now.
Right, and I think that's my biggest
That's
concern, and I know I'm the one that asked to
That's a
table it,
good
but-
point.
But I'm okay with this amount for this year, but I do think you're absolutely right. We need to have a conversation moving forward, and as Kristen said, there's a lot of conversations, but I think that
I agree.
this needs to be
Yeah.
a priority,
Last year's.
along with all of the other fire and rescue conversations as to who's paying what and what's fair.
I can recall back in 2006, 2007, and 2008, the conversations that were had. I never imagined during that time period that it would be the same amount in perpetuity. I always thought, as Kristen explains, that through attrition, we would lose those employees and they would rehire at the county level as county employees. I never imagined that we would pay that forever, and, you know. And then when someone says, well, the majority of calls, and Kristen's correct, you know, are in the city of Hagerstown, okay. I'll only say that I'm probably pretty sure the
Pay county
911
taxes.
center in Frederick County, the majority of calls are in the city of Frederick. The city of Frederick does not pay for their 911 service. So,
And one thing to add to that is that's why Michelle made a decision to include this as part of at least the consent agenda. Before, this had just been paid, and it was never brought up for an approval. So that's why, you know, it was determined this needed to be brought before the council to at least see that this was being done, and then we will do as you direct moving forward, and do exactly as you're saying.
Given this conversation, may I ask unanimous consent that my motion delete the sentence that says, this is the amount agreed upon based upon the cost-sharing formula? The motion itself is indicating this is the amount we owe them under an agreement. And if we're saying that we've been overpaying them, then we should remove that so it does not appear in our minutes.
I agree. I agree, Tom.
I agree with that, too.
whatever you want to do with the language, I don't care.
It's just, it
Everything
just seemed
else-
very odd that when this was all done, usually you would have an agreement as to what the parameters
Right.
of making such a payment would be. Nobody has that. So we need to have that.
Okay. As amended by Lou,
We should take that one sentence out, right?
Yes.
any more discussion? And this will be an item on the 27th of August, by the way.
We'll have conversations before then.
Yeah, we'll have a full agenda.
On the staff level between the two entities.
That amounts to about, what, 1.5 cents more property tax?
It does.
Yeah, close to that, yeah.
Yep.
1.3. Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, we'll move out of special session into the work session. Introduction of Jim Snyder, Information Technology Manager. Thank you, you were a huge help.
As always, isn't it?
Good job.
I just wanted to take just a brief minute to introduce our new IT manager, first one we've had in 15 years. IT manager, not, you know what I mean. Jim Snyder, I just want to give Jim an opportunity to introduce himself, and as you have issues with your technology, Jim will be the new go-to man for you if I'm not around.
You say that with a smile on your face.
I do, it's a big smile. Well, it all depends.
I'm still calling you, by the way.
Well, Mayor and council members, thank you for inviting me today to introduce myself. As Scott said, my name is Jim Snyder, the new IT manager for the city of Hagerstown. I've been on the job for about a week, so I've been taking the opportunity to meet with various directors and department heads and learn my way around the environment, what we're going to be working in. Just want to give you a little bit of my background in my past IT experience. Got my degree in computer science at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I've worked for 16 years. I worked for IT for the Walt Disney Company in various capacities and ended up there in management. I also did 10 years with IBM doing various duties. And over the last couple of years, I've had some IT positions with both Lowe's and most recently in Procter & Gamble. On a personal note, I'm local, was born in Hagerstown, raised in this area, went to school in Clear Spring, and came back to the area after my stint in Florida to raise my family here. My kids go to school in the county, so I'm very happy to be back here, and happy to be working for the city. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay, buddy. All right, next up is the Kiwanis Park continuing renovations to the Sailor House.
We're waiting on a gentleman named Marty Brubaker.
I'm sure nobody
He's always
knows.
late.
You may not know him.
He always keeps.
Late again,
Nothing changes. Yeah.
late again.
Putting irons in the fire, that hasn't changed either.
So now he's become a community activist.
Good afternoon. With me tonight is Ann Aldrich and, of course, Marty Brubaker from the Washington County Historic Trust. They've been working with us for about 3 years out at the Kiwanis Park, where there's a stone house that's commonly called the Sailor House that they've been working on renovations to. They have a proposal they'd like to go over with you tonight about some changes that they want to make to the agreement that we've had. So I think I'll turn it over to one of you to kind of highlight what you're proposing.
Okay, I'll lead off, and then Ann will follow. Ann is the real expert on this project. She knows the technical stuff. She's been a real ramrod with grants, things like that. She's worked well with Rodney. Rodney's been great in cooperating. And before I start, I want to say the rain is my fault also, because I started out with my top down. And that's a surefire this year, is a surefire, rain drawer. So there you go. Okay, so I think there's two thrusts here. One is we had the open space grant, which I think originally was going to be primarily used to bring the full array of utilities, water, sewer,
Correct.
along with the electric down, which is, it comes from the office park there, so it's a little bit of a fair draw. And in the meantime, I went on the board of the trust a couple years after I left office, and a number of us were looking at this project and saying, we're not going to be able to meet what we said we wanted to do, what's the most practical approach. And we talked to Rodney and worked out a number of things. One was to bring electric only, which we need, to the outside of the property. The inside would not be wired. We asked him to do 18th century grid wiring, but he couldn't do it.
Right, couldn't find the parts.
He couldn't
Right,
find it, no. And I think my grandmother's house had that, but anyhow, so what we've explained on here, sort of I won't read the whole thing, but a reallocation of open space funds. I think we have a much better walkway access plan than we were originally thinking. It's much less obtrusive, in my opinion, and less expensive, and it just winds, if you've been there, it winds around behind the property at grade, and will feed into the back of the property, instead of going up a ramp in the front, which would have, to me, hindered the historic aspects of this. And we have electric coming down, as I said, and some other work to be done, and some help with the front porch reconstruction, which will make this a nice centerpiece in the park. The porch will be functional. And Ann can go into any more details as needed about that. So, and originally, the thrust had been they wanted to make, the trust wanted to have this as an office. That's why we needed the full array of utilities, finishing, and the new board, so to speak, has decided that we don't know where we can get with that part of the property, and we'll make it weatherproof and make it a very well appearing, and then work on getting funds for the major renovation of that. Whether that becomes all-weather or 3-season, I don't know. For now, we have a 3-season approach for what's called the kitchen area, and we're working on that literally as we speak. We had what do we have, 16, 18 people out on Saturday? So there's a lot of volunteer pro bono work going on, and people are being trained in crafts. They're being trained in how to point old stone, in archaeology and other things. So we're still excited. We think we're doing a useful project for the city at no city tax dollars involved. So Andy, what would you?
Well, as Marty said, Saturday we ran our third lime mortar workshop, and we were really excited because we had some young tradesmen come to learn the trade so that they can increase their own work in historic restoration. And that's the goal from the trust standpoint, is how do we grow a new trades group? So if you go down to Kiwanis Park, you will now see that the gable end of the kitchen facing, I don't know, maybe west, Jefferson Boulevard, will be completely remortared, yeah, that end, by the end of next Saturday, by Saturday. And much of the front, of this front wall has been remortared, and the rest of the house is really fairly solid. So that will take care of the stonework. The archaeology is moving along. There's a dedicated group of people who come every Saturday to experience an archaeological dig and to learn about historical archaeology. They're focused on working in the inside the kitchen area, which is a mess of dirt from lots of groundhogs and whatever else over the years. They have found that the original floor was a brick floor. So it's been uncovered. We hope that we'll be part of the United Way Day of Caring, where we can get more volunteers in this fall to actually remove the rest of the dirt, so that next year we're really set to do lime plaster wall workshops, relay the floor, put in a ceiling, put in the one window and the door, and by the end of next year, we hope that the kitchen building, old kitchen will actually be serviceable as a classroom, 3-season classroom for historic building trade lectures, for environmental education, for anybody else who wants to use it. It's just a sweet, sweet little spot. And to date, we've had phenomenal commitment from the Mary Kay Bowman Fund. They've put $20,000 into the building, and that will help us finish the archaeology that's needed to put in the pathway, the kitchen, and rebuild the porch. And I was just out on site this morning in a pre-bid conference for the bid proposal for the porch rebuild that we hope will be up and functional by the end of by December, by the end of the warm season. The warm season keeps getting moderated, so. But that's where we're at right now, I think.
Yeah, so it's my understanding with Rodney that today, with your nod, he will prepare a revised agreement that both parties will sign, Second Amendment. And also, he'll have approval to reallocate the open space.
So in a nutshell, the three changes as I see them from where we're at now is that they're not going to be our long-term tenant there, that there won't be any bathrooms there in the near future that are permanent. There'll be a porta potty, which is what we have out there now and seems to be working fine, and that they're asking us to use some of our POS money that already is allocated on the building itself. That's kind of the changes.
And also, I think to have a facility there, the Antietam Creek, we hope, will be many of us hope will be a more accessible and more used facility as the years go by. And this is a nice centerpiece along the Antietam Creek. The landing is right down below there. So it's, and we own the property now across the creek, as I understand it. to the chagrin of some people. Okay. I remember that.
Sounds good to me.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
the
Thank you.
education that you're giving, you know, to the tradespeople, so that's really awesome.
Yeah, and the archaeology program has a lot of kids. So,
Yeah.
a lot of homeschoolers take advantage of it.
That's great.
I want to give a shout out to Emily Conrad on our staff, who's really spearheaded a lot of the archaeological work and other work on our behalf too, so thank you, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.
I'll take this opportunity to plug our archaeology camp at the Sailor House, which is July 22nd to 26th.
Okay.
$99 for 5 days from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Ages 7 and up are welcome.
I was out there Saturday, and I wasn't actually working, but I stopped by, try to stop by and see how things are going. And I was making up stuff that they were supposed to be looking for. So I was a little bit of a jester with them, but
And I would invite you all to stop by this Saturday. I know it's going to be blazing hot, but as long as everybody can stand it, we'll be there from 9 o'clock to 1 or 2, doing the pointing and doing the archaeology, so.
Yeah, I think one of the things, as Marty mentioned, one of the things that we learned when we acquired the property across the creek, that I don't think we knew at that time, and certainly I didn't until we talked to the owners. I think we met them there one of those days. And I remember Don Munson and I were there. Is that property that we purchased has like 2,000 feet of frontage on the Antietam Creek. Not only that, it's directly across from the outside of that horseshoe, so to speak, where Kiwanis Park is, but that the house used to provide some type of like a ferry service across the Antietam Creek to the other
Awesome.
side,
I
which I
didn't
thought
know
was pretty,
that.
well, yeah, that was one of the things shared with us.
Sort of like suspension
Yeah, it had,
cables.
yeah, they had a
that
cable and
ferry
they would
people
basically
across,
get on
yeah.
the flotil basically and it would pull you across, and that's how they got back and forth across the creek at that time. So I think that those types of things make this property increasingly interesting to be able to find a way to combine them at some point and create some of that park-like atmosphere, so.
Well, you may or may not know that in 1824, Peter Saylor and a group of other men approached the Maryland legislature and got the law passed to create the Antietam Fish Company,
Right.
which was one of the first fish conservation programs
Yeah.
known in the country. So it does have a lot of key points to it.
Okay, so we're good?
We'll draft
Thank you
the
very much.
amendment and get it to you to vote on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, discussion and follow-up from stakeholders meeting, Maryland Stadium Authority report. Scott's going to kick it off for us.
Mr. Mayor and Council, the MSA, Maryland Stadium Authority report that they presented to us in early May evaluated 3 sites. Those sites included the site at West Baltimore Street and Summit Avenue, the Central Lot site behind City Hall, and the Market House lot on Church Street. The West Baltimore Street Summit Avenue site scored the highest as a recommended site to place a multi-use facility. Since that report was presented by MSA, there have been many questions, concerns, alternatives presented and discussed among and with staff and with council members. Some thoughts on discussion moving forward would be to discuss the findings of the study itself, to understand what a Phase 2 study would be as it would relate to this particular project, and any additional information that may be available that could be related to council member thoughts on the findings, anything else we could provide. Third, a discussion of any alternative opportunities that have either been presented to us or which council members have an interest in presenting and learning more about for themselves. There is an understanding, I think, by all of us that there's an urgency in the community to continue moving forward, utilizing the momentum of the current UIP project. There's also an understanding, I believe, by all of us that another project is important to move forward on as a next step in community development. It's important for staff to get a clear understanding from this body as to the direction you all are looking to go, either on a phase 2 study to get you more information on this project before a phase 2 study is done, or to explore other opportunities that may or may not involve what the original intent of the first phase of this project was. A phase 2 study, from what I've been able to glean together, would consist of three things, not all inclusive, but would include three things: a preliminary design of a facility at the location that would be chosen by council in which to move forward. Secondly, a site due diligence, including environmental analysis, traffic study, development opportunities, etc. And third, a cost estimate for the proposed facility, given all this accumulated data. As we all know, Delegate Quarterman was able to get $300,000 from the state to pay for this phase 2 study. The environmental study was completed in 2012 for the recommended site. We don't believe that would have to be done again. There was also a traffic analysis that was done on the West Baltimore Street Summit Avenue site. That was done in 2012. Whether anything has changed since then would need to be determined as to whether another study would need to be done or not. On page 13 of the handout that the MSA provided in the executive summary, other potential next steps: securing a long-term agreement with a minor league team facility operator, reaching consensus on a site location that obviously would be come before that, acquiring rights to purchase the appropriate land parcels that would be included in this site placement, using the information, report, and findings to establish a development strategy to be used as a basis to further refine the building program and cost estimate, identify potential funding strategies and incentives, and work with other city agencies and business groups to attract private investment in the surrounding areas. That's kind of what we feel would be the basis for any discussion moving forward, not just on this phase 1 recommendation, but whether you go forward on a phase 2 or what we do. I think we all agree that, we want to keep this momentum going as far as community development goes. We just need to understand what that would be and whether you want to move forward or not.
I'll start out. I would like to discuss the deliverables of the phase 2 study. And I think I would like to, my understanding is that is our prerogative to define what phase 2 entails. I don't want to see this book dusted off and handed back to us as a phase 2 study. I want to know a lot of specifics about how we're going to tailor an agreement with a long-term tenant, how we're going to structure financing. I'd like to know some of the caveats of, what happens to the taxpayer if a long-term tenant bails on us. What are our options there? What are we looking at in terms of overall bond financing? How are we going to handle a maintenance fund? What percentage of ticket sales or concession sales are going to go into some kind of a maintenance fund for 10 years, 15 years down the road when this entity, this piece of development that we're going to do starts to break down, the plumbing goes, the seats need to be replaced and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to make a decision that we all walk away from and we leave future generations with some kind of an albatross that they have to figure out how to handle. I want to make sure that we have all that designed in on the front end. We know where the money is coming from for the maintenance fund and how we're going to support this thing for 30 years. I think that's that's where I want to see us do some work on phase two. I would like to see us go back to the Stadium Authority and say, here is what we would like to have from your phase two study. Maybe we don't need an environmental study this time. Maybe we don't need a traffic study. Maybe we don't need to know about where the parking garage is going to go.
All valid concerns that should be addressed in a phase two. I would
It would
see
be
it
my,
anyway.
it would be
Yeah,
my thought.
I don't want to see us commit the taxpayers $300,000 and then get something back that's not what doesn't meet our deliverables that we want to define.
So you're asking if the Stadium Authority can guarantee, like, these are the deliverables that we will see based
yeah.
on,
I'm saying that my desire would be that we all feed Scott with the deliverables that we would like to see, and Scott and Rodney sit down and come up with a packet, memorandum of understanding to the Stadium Authority saying this is what we want phase two to entail.
I was not part of the 2012
I wasn't either.
project, but I would agree with you that that is what, at least from a staff perspective, I would want to make sure everyone was on the same page with before they even attempted to begin accumulating data for a phase two. They knew exactly what you wanted to see. And because I agree with you, I would not want to have a phase two developed based upon some standard template that may be out there and it missed something that is crucial as far as what you all want to see.
and if it costs less than the 300,000, if we eliminate some of these other things and put together what we want, are we able to add another site, AKA Kristen's concept?
The information I received from the Stadium Authority would be that if another site was to be scored, we would obviously provide them with the location of that site, and for $4,000, they would do the study. For another $1,000, being that it was not a site originally scored, they would have, that would pay for their expenses to come in here and do whatever they needed to do while they were here. So it would be an additional $5,000.
So your point,
So
though,
we're
is
starting
that can we eliminate
Can we negotiate?
$5,000 worth of
Yeah.
deliverables
Right.
if you wanted to?
If we already have some of these things.
Yeah, we'll have to, I mean, that's.
I would not worry about eliminating an addition, I would not worry about eliminating $5,000. If that's what you wanted to do, we'll find $5,000 if that's what you want to do.
Well, so there's two issues though, right? One is whether we proceed with phase two, and one is whether we add another site.
And I don't think that we proceed with a phase two until we choose a site. So I would certainly much rather know how the site at Antietam and Mill Street scores before we move on to, I mean,
Well,
it
that
just
makes
makes
sense.
sense. Yeah.
Sure, I understand. Kristen, do you want to say
So are we making that decision right now?
I don't know. It's up to you guys.
I look at this Populous Crossroads report, and there's two versions. One was the summary we got in a PowerPoint, the other was the full report. You could get online and see. And other than those 70-some pages of information, there was really only 2 pages in that spoke to an evaluation of site selection, which I thought was going to be the bulk of that initial process. And in fact, those 2 pages, I think it was 11 and 12, and then it was repeated again on like 63 and 64. It was included in page 15 of our summary presentation, the PowerPoint. And it had already sort of whittled itself down to those 3 locations, and it used this scoring system of, I think, points, 1 through 5. But it had it didn't provide any parameters really of how that was measured. It broke it into 4 categories. So, you had your physical factors and your site procurement. One site got a 3, another got a 2, another got a 1. I don't know what basis was used by Populous to even come up with how those points were created. I guess for me, I was expecting out of that evaluation something a bit more explanatory than this very rudimentary scoring that said, oh, this one got a 51 and the one behind it got a 46. And I mean, it's that basic.
Councilman, would you agree that having a methodology of scoring would have been a good thing to have, understanding?
It would be good for this body to understand
right.
how that methodology was arranged, because you
Right.
got one that's scoring a 2, that's like $2 million to acquire the property, or scores a 4, and then you got another one scoring a 2 that's like $8 million to acquire the property. $6 million on a $45 million project, to be a 2-point difference in an evaluation is a big difference. And I just don't think that was taken into account to the detail that I guess I anticipated, which would have provided that. And to hear that we're set to embark on expending money for a phase 2 evaluation, as you indicated, at least 2 of those 3 parameters on Populous's preferred location are already complete, and the reality is the 3rd parameter of site design is already there. And I'm still a little confused by this, because if you look at their site sheet, they have the 8 sites listed, and it says the stadium footprint for Site 2, only Site 2, was based upon the HKS fit study, which is the 2012 fit out of a stadium on that location. So the design is already laid out. Now, there's some confusion in that layout, because in your summary that you received and the final report online, the configuration is actually different. I mean, there's actually 2 different layouts for that location. I'm still not sure which one is the correct one that they used for evaluation, because if you look at that, it's about a $2 to $3 million difference in property acquisition cost. And so I don't know how they came up with that factor for that number based on what configuration of that site that they used. And it's difficult for me to sit there and see a report like that and say, yeah, I'm going to proceed, on this $45 million endeavor based on that very basic information that just on its face of the information itself, I don't agree with, number one, but secondly, that doesn't seem to even begin to answer the question of what was posed in your initial comments, which is the vision of this body. I mean, we have a city center plan. We had a goal-setting session. None of this effort was included in that in those deliberations, and of which the potential impact is, more expensive than all of those other things combined that we come up with. And that to me is odd to see, to say, okay, well, we're going to go ahead to the next step without that ever being a consideration. And as I said in my emails to folks, as I've said to you here, as I've said publicly, I don't think that this is a publicly supported idea. Maybe the notion of continuing, but with investment, but I don't think that this specific item is publicly supported. And that's just being as frank as I can. I don't think that it'll survive the next city election. I don't think that we're going to see, I see one of the county commissioners here to say, I don't think we're going to see county financial support for this particular idea. And so, but if we are proceeding down this path and, there is interest, to do so, I feel like I've had the luxury, and Lou has as well, I think, of seeing a number of these reports. And, folks keep referring to this alternative idea as mine. It's not mine. I mean, it came out of one of the evaluations. It came out of the 2013 evaluation done by the same company that did the 2012 evaluation that said 6 months after it evaluated and said one site was the best, came back and said another site was the best. So that's just a reality. And one of the sites as part of that evaluation that stuck out to me is the site that I've spoken to folks about, which is the East Baltimore Street location. And if I could, just briefly, as I expressed to those stakeholders, when I've had the opportunity to look at all these different reports that consultants have put together, that site, just the numbers, as less properties to acquire, significantly less acquisition cost, you get at least 3 times the amount of land to work with. There is well more surrounding land for development and redevelopment. It has immensely better accessibility. It has multiple acres of green space already surrounding it in a park setting. It provides for the opportunity to reuse actual vacant space that's currently for sale. There's no impact to existing operations of the county. There's no need for relocation, of those county functions. It's still downtown, and yet folks can argue it's not downtown. And it connects the East End with downtown, just like our cultural trail has done to the south end. It supports the Catalyst project potentials of redevelopment of the Hospital Hill site, as well as the areas like the Venice on Dole Highway. We all know how some of that area is. It provides the opportunity to use federal funds to meet our MS4 credits with the restoration of the creek that was channelized in the 30s. It provides a potential for consolidation of some local governmental services. It could improve the access for the Washington County Public Schools bus depot. It has the potential for shared use of parking area with other potential venues. It provides opportunity for access to historic funds for redevelopment of some of the properties like the stone building at the Forsyth property. And it has a great view shed, in that part of the community. And so, I just look at those facets, and I'm not doing it in any particular order to have some preference except to weigh the merits of what I guess I thought the populace evaluation would more in-depth do. And so that's me. So if there are folks that want to move forward, for me, it's a fairly simple process because of all the evaluations, of all the reports we've gotten. To me, for all those points raised, that makes the most sense. that to me is the most doable. That is the best compromise, and
Do you have an estimated cost on that?
I don't. But I tell you what, if we use the Phase 2 money to do that particular location, obviously, all of the stuff for the other place is already done. The environmental report's already done for West Baltimore. The site design is already done. The property acquisition process, the design costs, the financial implications are already done for that.
You don't think anything's changed in 7 years?
Not enough to effectuate the change except for the astronomical increase in cost of the total project. Other than that, no. 2012, it was a couple
Why do you
$1 million
think that
project, now it's
after
45
90
million.
years of a stadium being in that area, that we haven't seen any economic development in that area after 90 years?
I don't know.
Okay.
And we had a hospital there for a significant number of those years.
Right. I think that would have driven some.
So I think,
We can use that same argument for downtown.
you know, that gets back to our deliverables, what we want the study to come up with. One of the things I would like to see as part of the study also is how's the MSA proposed to use the site for things other than baseball? We talked about the design of the site. How, is there a possibility on whichever site we study, or, you know, can we use it for concerts? Can we use it for soccer? Are there other sporting events we can have there? Can we use it? How does that fit into the footprint? And where's the best location to house that?
I think, and listen, I'm not trying to sell either site. I'm really not. I'm way past that. So I believe, first off, I don't believe it's the Maryland Stadium Authority's responsibility to tell us what events we can have in a facility. I do believe that they can help with design of a facility that can meet certain needs.
That's what we would
I
give.
don't believe that the design of 2012 will be the design of 2019. I don't believe that the acquisition of properties cost from 2012 will be the acquisition of property cost for 2019. I do know for a fact that in 2012, Chief was sent to have a conversation with property owners, a one-time conversation about how, you know, what do you think you want for your property if this project happens? There was no negotiating of anything in 2012. I also believe that there is a way to make everything work at either site, just so you know, at either site. I'm not ruling out the Baltimore Mill Street site. I do know that, I know some costs associated with that. I know what the cost of moving the Hagerstown Light Department and Central Maintenance Garage, and a project that was talked about over the last couple of years to consolidate that into the First Urban Fiber property, along with maybe parks and rec and public works, and free up buildings that we could possibly sell in the future. I do know what that cost is. That cost is well over $7 million. I don't know what the cost of the Meredith parking lot is. I don't know what the cost of the Physion property is. I don't know any of that. I don't know what the cost of the old building there on Mill Street is. I don't know any cost in that. So I do know, before we get to any of those costs, we're looking at $7 million. I do know that much. So either way, look at Baltimore Mill Street, have them do the matrix that Kristen doesn't believe is the right thing to do, to put those numbers together and see how it scores, and then make a decision about what you would like to do, and if you would like to do anything at all.
I think that we had talked before, I know we had talked before, and that we all agreed that we needed something, right, at that site downtown, you know, to help the UIP one. So On our way to Hagerstown, Indiana, Emily and I were driving down 70 for a long time, and we found what we think just might be the answer, possibly. So we have these handouts.
Is it a small town?
Oh, it's in Huber Heights, Ohio. It is the Rose Music Center.
The Rose, what?
I know you're a Jeff Dallas.
So I think our mission goes back to what is our vision, which has been brought up several times tonight. And we've met as a council now for a very long time, and we've discussed what is our vision. We came up with goals, we came up with a strategic plan. And, you know, we are an arts and entertainment district. We've invested a lot of money in it. We've been growing. It's been fairly successful. And when we were driving past this point, we saw a music center, and both of us were like, okay, we have to go check this out. We have to go check it out. And it was like the stars aligned and the goosebumps happened, and we were like, okay, this could work. This could work from where we're at. And then we spoke to their city administrator, and we're kind of further convinced that maybe this is worth exploring, since we know we need something. What is that something?
You have your, yep.
A clicker?
So we have prepared a PowerPoint presentation.
Mine was like tape on paper.
Oh, well, that's because,
I don't know how to
Yes.
start the video.
Wow.
where's Eric?
It's okay, we'll just show pictures.
So as you can see, this is an outdoor amphitheater that is covered. And one of the things that is unique about this is that you never have to worry about the weather and the elements from actually affecting them. They are, and again, this is in Huber Heights, Ohio. It has, let's see, it was built in, what year was it?
2015.
2015. They used it, just like it says there, as the Catalyst project. They do have a similar population and median income, and even more importantly is the fact that this center is about an hour and a half from, like what we would consider Jiffy Lube or, one of the bigger
Baltimore.
concerts.
Meriwether
Yeah,
Post.
Baltimore, Washington. Pardon me?
Meriwether Post.
Meriwether, exactly. The city owns and maintains the center, which we found that, oh gosh, that's amazing, because we would like to do that too. They did partner with the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra, as you can see there, to book their talent, and Emily can probably list some of the talents that they, some of the people that they have there.
I mean, they have smaller acts, but still big name acts like Sugarland, Lady Antebellum, ZZ Top is gonna be there. So, the music world is going this direction. You know, a lot of artists are unable to sell 30,000 seat stadiums any longer. So this 45 to 5,000 seat amphitheater, outdoor theater is kind of the way that the music world is going. And we did have very preliminary discussions with the Maryland Theater to make sure, obviously with a 1,500 seat venue, that they wouldn't, one, be offended by us even proposing this idea, and two, if it would work in partnership with them. And they were very excited because there are a lot of large theaters with smaller theaters that work together.
Is there another slide?
Yeah. So they have about 9 to 12 major shows a year between April and September, and then the rest of the time they use the facility for different events. They have a wine festival, they have what's equivalent to our Blues Fest there, different smaller acts and high school acts, things like that.
So this would have a direct and indirect economic impact. They have created at Huber Heights 200 seasonal jobs, 12 full-time positions, and 80% of their employees actually return because of the customer experience and the fact that the employer is just so good. And like Emily said, it does tie into the Hagerstown Arts and Entertainment District. If we, again, imagine if we were able to put it where the MSA decided, thought that original site should be. So, and the way that I personally look at it, when you go to a baseball game, when you go to a sports thing, you're thinking, when I get there, I'm going to be at the concession stand and I'm going to get a hot dog and hamburger or the barbecue at Baltimore or whatever that is. And that's your plan. However, and what we want to do in our downtown core is bring restaurants and breweries and all these, retail shops and such. So when you go to a concert or when you go to the Maryland Theater, you think to yourself, where am I going to eat before? Where am I going to stop before I go to the concert? Where am I going to stop before I go see Kenny Rogers? So we think that this could be an indirect economic impact because of the foot traffic that it would actually increase to our downtown.
And we talked at length to their city administrator and the people that put it together, and I just think it meets the goal that we've all been talking about. We need another project. We need something that's sustainable. We need to get feet in downtown. We need something to work on. This ties in with what we're already doing, arts and entertainment. It's a complement to the Maryland Theater that is working right now. And I think with our county and especially our city being focused on arts and entertainment and having Barbara Ingram, something like this makes sense. I mean, imagine being able to go see Lady Antebellum downtown Hagerstown.
Go to what?
Lady Antebellum, it's a.
ZZ Top
we'll talk about
Foreigner,
that.
that's more
Yeah,
your age.
there, REO Speedwagon.
So how many, did you find out what a cost of a facility like this would be?
It
We
was
actually did.
It was $19 million, and that included, they built a parking lot.
A large parking lot. And there are many of these boutique centers that are actually popping up all over the place,
This
so.
was just the one we
Yeah.
visited, but there's several others that we have.
And they have 9 to 12 major shows a year.
Yes, as a matter of fact, when they did their feasibility study, their goal for their first year was to break even. And they had a $23,000 profit that year, and it just keeps growing. Now, they know that the honeymoon phase is eventually gonna wear off and they'll be somewhere in between, but it's just done tremendously better than what they expected. So we just thought that, we talk about things that make sense. To me personally, this makes sense.
So you couldn't have 9 to 12 major shows in a downtown multi-use sports and event center that would also hold 70 minor league baseball games and numerous other sports events and things like that that would bring you
So
in.
It's not covered.
Our baseball,
No, it's
yeah,
not
it's
covered.
not
You're right.
covered, and
It
our
wouldn't be.
baseball off-season is cold here.
Mm-hmm.
When baseball's in season, I doubt they're gonna let 4,500 people out on a field that they have to maintain and keep nice. If our
8 months
off-season,
out
it
of
was
the year,
warm.
8 months out of the year it can be used.
What? Yeah, from October, when it's cold, that's an issue. I mean, we have to think about that. There's weather here, it gets cold here.
Yeah, November,
So you can't-
December, January, February, yeah.
October.
I just think that we would be
March.
limited with, having an outdoor concert event center like this in a baseball. It's two different things. You wouldn't be able to do the same
You can't
type of
put
thing.
ZZ Top in an outdoor
Yeah.
facility in April.
Right, and the type of acts that this particular music center draws, it's not, a baseball stadium type of venue. It's just totally different.
I understand. Yeah. I do understand.
So we just thought the more questions we asked, the more it seemed to align with what we initially said our vision was and the point of some sort of downtown catalyst project, which is economic development, feet on the streets, and enriching our community. And there were so many similarities between Huber Heights and Hagerstown that we felt like we would be doing a disservice to not bring it up. Because literally talking to their city administrator was like talking to Scott or anyone in here that is encouraging this. He was using the words like catalyst projects and economic development and.
Right
we wanted
place,
to-
right time.
Yes, right place, right time, and the more we heard and the more questions that we answered, we had Michelle look at their financials, their profit and loss. I mean, everything is solid, and they have everything, it's very transparent. They sent us everything, their blueprints, how they did it, how they went about it.
And the footprint is small.
Yes.
It's much smaller. It's a much smaller footprint, so
It looks large, but it's.
Yeah, it's not that-
When you're standing beside it, it's not.
it's not that big. It's very-
Questions? Comments?
Yeah. You guys want to say anything? You love it. I know you
Do not
do.
rain on our parade.
Yeah. I mean, this.
So the construction of it itself cost 19 million.
Yes.
With the parking lots.
It was a lot, right?
Pardon me?
It was a lot.
Parking lot,
A
yeah.
parking lot.
Yes, parking lots.
And, I mean, was there any calls for land acquisition, or did the city own the land, or what?
Yes, there was land acquisition cost. We have all of that.
Is that all part of the 19 million
Yes.
Yes,
to create it?
Yes.
yes.
And there are other less expensive ones, like the one in South Carolina has more of a,
In
not
North
a
Carolina,
solid,
Charlottesville?
yeah, not a solid top, it's more of like a almost tent circus type top. I mean, there are multiple ways you can do it, but just thought it's half the price and fits into the theme of our city and what we've been investing in and working in, and encourages arts and entertainment, which I think is what we have said our vision is.
Food for thought.
What?
Say
Go ahead.
something.
It doesn't impact where I want to go with the stadium, so I don't care.
Well, that, I mean, just imagine if we're able to somehow do both projects and tie the two together. Wouldn't that be perfect?
Sounds expensive.
It does sound
Um,
expensive, but yours is less expensive and mine is less expensive, so
You don't know what Kristen's would cost.
I don't, but in his research, you're right.
In theory.
In his,
When people throw out,
So of course, the next step would be the dreaded word, feasibility study, but they did one there. I mean, that's what they
Yeah.
did, and they looked at the markets and, you know, the this and that. So obviously, that's something that we would need to discuss. But we just wanted to throw it out there since we've been talking about this at nauseum, and we all keep saying we want something to happen. What is that something? You've mentioned an amphitheater, you've mentioned alternate ideas, Lou has, so.
this just brings another idea to the table.
It's another dimension, yeah. I see the advantage of having my thought was it would be a facility that could do this and have, ideally have baseball, have soccer, have other venues all tied in. And that would preclude it from being a covered facility like this. And then there's the other thing that, what are the advantages, disadvantages of having a tenant, like a team, a soccer team or a baseball team or whatever that's going to occupy that facility for a certain number of games per year, guaranteed.
Well, this, and I
guaranteed
think
income.
we have so many community partners that are music-oriented, like the Maryland Theater, the
Right.
Maryland Symphony Orchestra, which they partnered with their symphony orchestra. And then you would have to hire a management company, like you would have to bring in the big-name acts, I mean.
And the management company of this organization is willing to speak with Jessica at the Maryland Theater. I mean, we already have in our backyard someone that already books talent, so we already have that niche, do you know what I mean? In order to be able to book bigger venues. And the reason they don't book bigger venues is because the seat capacity isn't there. So we would, and she would be all for it because they wouldn't be competing against one another, the two different venues. I understand it's not an anchor tenant, but it does allow for, even the county schools or, the Fresh Academics or cheer competitions. It's not limited to just the concerts, but there's opportunities for many other organizations in the county to be able to use it. South High, Williamsport, Clear Spring, they're all looking for additional practice spaces or the ability for even Barbara Ingram to use this type of facility to introduce their students to bigger productions and being able to, it's part of their goal setting also, to find other practice spaces, so.
I think these are all great ideas. There's only one minor problem.
Where's the money coming from?
Yeah, I mean, so when you say it only cost them 19 million to build this, I'm thinking we're sort of choking on the thought of contributing around 5 million to a $50 million project, and we don't have anybody else coming to the table saying, out of that $19 million you're gonna have to spend, we want to be a player. And I think we need to be careful. We have spent about the last X amount of months talking to CJ in the paper and making it clear that the stadium isn't a city project, because it never has been a city project. It was never brought up by any city council members to say, you know what? what I want to spend all our time on is a baseball stadium. And now we're spending a lot of time taking ownership of something, okay? Now, just so I can be heard, I continue to say what I've always said. Anybody who comes and sits there and starts their conversation out with, by the way, I'm not here to ask for money, my ears are very open, okay? And so far, that's what our delegate and Dan Speeden have said. They've said, we're not here to ask for money. They've tried to convince us, good or bad, that this is a project that could be done that would not cost the city of Hagerstown any money. It's up to many people to decide whether that's true or false. Kristen's absolutely right. I've said it many times, and I'll say it again. It'll be decided again a year from November.
Yeah, well, if we continue on this course, it will definitely
Well,
be
Bob,
decided a year from November.
Bob, if we continue on this course at full speed ahead, between all the funding sources that have to come into play, there won't be groundbroken or money dedicated before November of next year.
I wouldn't think there would be groundbreaking,
No,
but I do think that there would be commitments made.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it can be done that fast. I'm not saying it can or it can't be. But what I'm saying is, one of the first things this body's got to decide is this going to be a city project? Now, I have no problems at all, and you know, I've told this to anybody who wants to listen. I have no problems with the Phase 2 study. If we're not being asked to fund it, I don't have a problem with it. We can always decide that we want to spend a couple $1,000s on a study at this other site. But I just say to you, as soon as you start doing that, you start taking ownership of it. Because this isn't what was presented to us by the people that we claim have ownership of this project. So they have ownership of this project, they want to spend state money that they have, and that'll also be an issue in November. Okay? It takes a lot of political stamina on either side of this fence, okay? And I know from reading the emails, people are convinced that the reason it didn't pass last time is because people weren't informed. Information's a hard thing in this world because people are going to believe whatever they want to believe. You can believe the studies that show we can do this at net zero expense. You can believe that the studies are going to say whatever people want them to say. So it's like I thought about, well, the way to solve this is to put it on a referendum. But you can't put it on a referendum. What's your question going to be? If your question is, do you want a stadium? Well, people are going to say, well, who's going to pay for it? So if you say you want a stadium that isn't going to cost you any money, everybody will say, yeah. If you say you want a stadium that you're going to have to cost $40 million for and you're going to pay for it, they'll probably say no. So it is this body's necessity to be informed, not so much being able to come up with something you can pose to the electorate by way of a referendum question. It's going to be up to those who run for election to convince the electorate which is the right side. But I would just reiterate that what's being asked of us is simply to tell our state delegate and the others, CVP, who brought this to us, yeah, go ahead and spend your money if you want to and you think you can put this package together. My concern is that if we do otherwise, we take ownership. It's now our project, and now we're doing it. And I don't think anybody ever looked at this as a city project. That, to me, has nothing to do with this. They don't have, listen, if what Ripken told us is accurate, if what Maryland Stadium Authority will more than likely say, because it will follow the Ripken study, they're going to come back and say you can do this without really spending taxpayer money. And they're going to give you all the reasons. And you can believe it or you won't. It's one or the other, either way. But that's essentially what Ripken said, right? again, Kristen, whether you agree with it or not, that's essentially what Ripken said, with the increase in tax this and this and this, it's ultimately gonna pay for itself. Again, I'm not saying that I buy into that, I believe it or I don't believe it, but there's certainly a lot of things happening. So I would say, for my own thought process about today's meeting shouldn't be about whether we do a music center, it shouldn't be whether we do a stadium, it shouldn't be whether we do a stadium at this site or that site. It should be, do we do a concept study for a stadium on this site, which means you got the decision tree. Today is not a decision of whether we proceed with the stadium, but it may be a day to decide not to proceed with the stadium, okay? Because if the flavor of the council is that this site isn't the site, then we're back to square one.
And for me, and I said it a little earlier, it's fairly easy as it applies to that specific question. I just don't agree with that location. And I feel that we have the ability as the council to say, and I think I've said it repetitively now, I'm fine with the state proceeding with a phase 2 evaluation of this configuration of site 1. That's where I'm at. In their money, but it's a site I think is the most appropriate for that evaluation purpose. I don't see the necessity to spend some $4,000 or $5,000 to go back. I've read enough of these studies now to understand for myself that this meets checks all of the boxes for me as being the most viable location that accomplishes all of the stuff talked about in all of those evaluations, to say, you want to do a phase 2 evaluation with your money, go do it on this.
Is that the Baltimore and Mill Street site? Well, and
That's where I'm at.
Would
I
that make-
will interject my thought. My thought is that a decision should be made whether or not we have staff, which we're taking staff's time, Rodney, Scott, Dan Spedden, those kind of people, to put together the parameters of an MOU so that we can look at and decide if that's what we want to move forward on through an MOU with the Maryland Stadium Authority to do a phase 2 study. But it has to be, we have to pick a site. It has to be a site, so.
Well, the only thing I would say on Kristen's site is, before I would want to do that, I'd want to hear from the folks who brought this site to the table to find out whether there is going to be the support for financing of an alternate site. Because as I see it, the most minor financial player in this game is us.
Yeah, at this point it is, you're right.
And I also will say this, I would vote against spending that money, or the couple $1,000s I would vote against, because now somebody's sitting at the table wanting money for a project that they didn't want money for. So, I think one of the problems you have is, it sounds like so many of the players that are involved in bringing this to us think this is the site they want to put it at. But that's up to everybody else. I just again say, this is not a city project as far as I was concerned, have ever been concerned.
I don't know how you reach this conclusion that we're the minor player financially. I mean, I haven't heard that another entity is going to assume the debt burden of the deck, that another entity is going to assume the bulk of the bond security for this debt. We're going to get contributions from other entities, some of which have alluded they don't really have an interest in being a contributing party anymore, but we're going to carry that debt. We're going to carry that debt on that note that says, yeah, somebody's going to guarantee to be our tenant.
I think that's a big.
Under parameters, we haven't even come close to
I
agreeing.
think that's a big assumption, Kristen.
But what I'm saying is, you said that we're the smallest financial contributor. I don't think that that's what's being asked of us at all. I think we're being asked to assume a great level of financial responsibility and obligation to a gamble, frankly, that a lot of others would like to put in our lap.
Well, what I know is this. I know it's been told us many, many times, including by Senator Serafini this year. The funding model for a stadium in Maryland is a third private, a third state, and a third local, okay? If I made it easy and said 45 million, that's 15 million private, that's 15 million from the state. That leaves 15 million local. We just had a discussion about double taxation and everything else. I certainly would never anticipate the city would put up as much money as the county, given that every county dollar is city taxpayer money. So I would anticipate a funding regime where maybe we put up 5 million of a $45 million project. You're making assumptions that the city of Hagerstown is going to do the bond issues. That's an assumption, Kristen.
It is, but it hasn't been fleshed out yet.
Well, all I can say is that's only going to be done by a vote of this body. And it may be that the city says to the county, this is a county project. Have the county float the bonds. This is the whole issue that I have here. I think this is a great idea. I love it, all that. I'm sure that I'll go to my grave before anybody ever gets $15 million in private funding to do this. So I think we're having a great discussion about something that's never going to happen any more than it's ever happened in the past. And when it comes to maintenance, okay, how old's our stadium?
90 years.
It's the oldest stadium in the country, right?
It's the second oldest in the country, but the most active.
Okay, and any idea, like, what, maybe most stadiums are less than 50 years old, would you say?
The people who are playing it. So,
Right? The answer is, we won't have to maintain this stadium after 40 years. We'll have to build a new one. Oh, you think I'm kidding? Just take a look at major league ballparks. Take a look at, that's why I asked the question. We're the second oldest stadium in the nation, and it's 90 years old. Well, you think there's a bunch of them that are 85 years old, 80 years old, 70 years old? I mean, an old stadium in this nation is 50 years old. This stadium will be obsolete in 50 years, and it'll be time to build a new one. It won't be time to do maintenance on it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. You'll have these studies that show it can be done. And you have communities where it's worked, just like you have communities where that's worked. But somebody's got to decide where they're getting the money from. And that's why I find this discussion tonight easy, because nobody's asking me for money. Do I think it's going to go anywhere? I don't think it's ever going to go anywhere.
And that's what I don't understand is I keep asking what makes this time different, and I understand no one's asking us for money and that's great, but it's still taxpayer money that we're still going to spend to have a study that we already have. So what is different this time? And is this part of our vision for the city? I mean.
Well, and that's why I say to you, if you start wanting to direct where it should go and this and that, then you're taking ownership of the project.
Yeah, I think we all feel that there's something missing. We need some other catalyst downtown. We've done a lot with the development of the theater, with the BISFA, with the plaza that's coming, with the cultural trail. We've had Imagine Hagerstown, we've seen what the turnout is like on those events and everything. There's something missing to produce that foot
And
traffic.
Austin,
called a boutique music center.
yeah, but the answer
Yeah,
to
12 times a year.
the answer, whether it's a boutique
Better than
music
zero.
center, a professional soccer stadium, a professional baseball stadium, a multi-event center, there's one thing that you're gonna find in common on it all. And that is, there is no way that this city is going to be able to fund any one of those projects on its own.
No, I agree.
No.
So if that's the case, I think what you need to do, instead of, one of the things the baseball stadium is, it has other people coming to us saying, we want to do this. We got the state involved right now. Whether we get others involved, I don't know, but if you just set off on your own, before we say we need to, that's a great project, but we need to get buy-in from other people, instead of just saying we're gonna do it, because how do we do it? If we just say we're gonna do it, we go to the county and say we want you to give us money for it, we go to the state where our delegation is pushing for a stadium, it's hard to go to the state and ask them for that.
At least some form of this idea is in one of our plans. I mean, the amphitheater's in the cultural
In
trail
an urban
plan.
partners plan that
It's
you
not in that-
believe
it's
in
not in
because
that
it was
plan.
put together by these
It's not even in that
experts
plan.
who came to put this plan.
It's in the cultural trail plan, which are
I
two different
agree with
plans.
you.
Oh, the cultural trail plan's a great plan.
That's why I continuously come back over and over again and say, do you
Don't do
want,
that.
Don't give me that look.
Don't do that.
do you want the stadium to become a city project? That's
No, I
the
want you to
exact
be the
reason I
mayor
say
and
it.
support the city.
You said, do you want this, I'm
The
sorry.
stadium project to be a city project. And like I say, the more we take ownership over where it should be and what should be done here, the more we say, yeah. We'll take, the more we say, you all have an idea. You think you can finance it. You think you can make it work. Go ahead. Go ahead, try to do it. We're not committed to a penny. I mean, I haven't seen an MOU, but I can guarantee you, and everybody knows it, if that MOU obligates us to any financial obligation in the future at all, I would vote no. Now, if the answer is that the body doesn't want to spend the state money because it's taxpayers' money, that's fine.
Yeah, but nobody's gonna read it that way. In other words, I'll give you this example.
No, I understand, they're gonna read
Meeting-
newspapers, city project.
Meeting July 2nd, we had, right? Canceled before it started. And if we would have had a deliberation at that meeting and 3 members would have said no, to that particular notion, city votes no to move forward with stadium. I mean, that would have been it, right? We spend this $300,000 of somebody else's money that went and got it, and what's agreed? City council moves forward with stadium project. So for me, if that's what's going to happen, and I'm going to be accused falsely of doing that, then for me, it's gonna be under the parameters of a place that I have some modicum of belief that is actually, publicly, supported.
I don't care if I get blamed for it or not. I want to see some sort of catalyst spark development, spark foot traffic in downtown Hagerstown. And to your point, if someone else is willing to pay for it and the city doesn't have to pay for it, I think that's the ideal way to go. So do we,
That's what I think. Again, I'm not at all sold on anything, except that I'm not being asked to be sold on anything. And again, my concern is the private financing. And if the answer is gonna be that that's gonna make it that much more difficult to get, then it just becomes that much more impossible. 'Cause
And
if
the
you don't have
public
the money to
financing
do
from a
this, you don't
county
have
who has
anything.
said openly that they don't want to be involved in this project.
Well, I'm one who's also indicated that I think we should have the county commissioners at the table to discuss it.
Amen.
There are a lot of mixed things that I get. I hear
If
people
the-
tell me both sides, but I can tell you this, I have not spoken to a county commissioner about the project. I've heard people tell me that there's support for a multi-use. I've heard people tell me there isn't, so I don't know. I would like to hear from them.
I don't understand why the county wouldn't support something that is designed that is going to raise property values and raise county revenues along with city revenues.
At what point during the previous deliberations about this project were they invited or was it discussed?
They were in on it pretty early on.
Early?
Well, because they helped pay for the study.
Yeah,
Okay.
they were in on it early, they were early on. We pretty much, The beauty of the last time, seriously, the beauty of that was you had government. You had the state, the county, and the city all on board. You had our state controller up here repeatedly pushing this project. He's a great believer in minor league baseball, but we did not have the last component, and that is the private financing. I still don't think we will, but it's not me.
So how can we learn what the right site and the right project, if we've got this other site that we're talking about, we've got this new concept, and we have this old study from 2012, like, how can we get all of this information and
Well,
be
you
like,
do
oh,
studies
here's,
until you get the answer you
oh
want.
my gosh, so many studies.
Well, I mean, that's the answer.
Everybody hates
You do
them.
studies, do you?
No one wants to
I
pay
know.
for 'em,
I mean, so how
but-
can
I mean, how many
we
times
make
do we have to
sure
study
that
these?
we're making the, the best decision with all the information?
You can ask Paul Quarterman sitting right back there, and he'll tell you that, how many studies do you think you see during a session of people who want money from the state of Maryland? Because that's how you get money from the state of Maryland. You just don't ask and it appears. I mean, you have to, there are.
And see, I don't even know if you have the state money, if you end up with telling the Maryland Stadium Authority to do a site that was ranked.
Not the site that they
Not the
picked.
site that they picked, yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. But I've always looked at this as asking us to be a partner in this, not to be the people who come and say, this is what we need to do.
Mr. City Administrator, what are your suggestions?
I'm not elected to make those decisions.
No, you're not, no. But I think that.
No, I mean, you all know I have my opinion, and, the Maryland Stadium Authority is gonna do what they wanna do as long as they get paid for it. And if we come up with an MOU based upon Austin, those criteria that you have,
Some
said that you want to
components of what
see.
he wants, but there's other components also.
Oh, sure. That would be a way to start. Looking at that East End site, that was not one of the sites that they originally, had to choose from to recommend. They had 3 sites. That was not one of them. So coming back and doing a look at that site, but I agree with Councilman Alshire that one thing about this study, and I will admit it jumped out at me initially, was you can score these things all you want, but what is the score based on? How are they developing? How are they putting a number on a particular site, whether it's a 1 or a 4? What is that determination? The other thing I would tell you is that of all the discussions we've had, internally and with other entities that have been interested in doing something with us, opportunity zones, putting something where those can be taken advantage of are in every conversation, to the point where they don't even want to express an interest with us if there is not an opportunity zone available to them, because of how lucrative to development those can be. We know that the East End doesn't have an opportunity zone. Downtown has 5, I think, 4 or 5. And those are of great interest. I know in the discussion we had with the soccer group, that was huge. They probably would not consider whether it be a shared site or a dedicated site if there was not an opportunity zone involved. So again, that is a major consideration.
That's another interesting topic you bring up. Are we going to discuss that?
What's that?
The soccer opportunity?
I can, it seems like they have certainly made their contacts around town here. And the prospect of having a United Soccer League professional team, League One team, based here. Again, they feel the same way I think minor league baseball feels about Hagerstown as a geographic middle point to insert Hagerstown in a league that goes as high as New York or Massachusetts, and goes as north as there, and as far south as Georgia. Hagerstown becomes, we're, just because we're located, a great fit for that. The problem that we have, and some research I've done since that discussion, is the fact that they like to look at sites without any actual investor or owner in mind. It's kind of a, we pick you, now we'll go find somebody that wants to put a team there. They have been very aggressive in site selection, and from what I have read, they have been very successful in doing what they say they're going to do. And that even comes from one source that is very critical on building stadiums. Or build, in this case, actually building stadium. I know we stay away from stadium word. But in this case with soccer, and they also insist on it being a shared use. They look for 200 to 250 events a year at whatever site they come into. Hopefully, we're going to get some more information from Loudoun County here fairly soon. They have joined up with USL, and I'd like to see what that's involved in. But again, that's another opportunity.
But is that a deliverable, though, that the MSA could take, is can we mix these two sports?
Well, sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be part, again.
I don't know how you do it any other way.
The design of a stadium in 2012 and the design of a stadium, multi-use, whatever you want to call it, in 2019 are not going to look the same. They just aren't.
And there are definitely some drawbacks in having a stadium that is configured. I mean, look at Yankee Stadium where the New York Red Bull or the other New York team play. It is not as good a fan experience to watch a soccer game in a baseball stadium as it is to build a DC United Audi Field that is built just for soccer. So, that's the one thing, the one fantastic thing about this is that there is interest in doing something. Not only from you all, but also from people we're getting. We just had a meeting today on economic development. We're getting more hits on inquiries to develop in this area than we have gotten in years, potentially decades. So this area is ripe to do something. It's just a matter of what do we want to do. And I agree, just from where I'm sitting here, and if I'm looking at this as a taxpayer, I also am looking at what Councilman Metzner's saying, as far as that money's sitting there. Let's use it for something, and let's use it to get additional information. I personally, I would like to see what an East End site would do. And I've told you all this, and say it publicly. To me, it's a philosophical question here. It's do we continue urban revitalization with the opportunities we have downtown, or do we look at bringing up an area of town that is struggling and that could use what we've done downtown in that area?
But isn't that the area, though, that we don't have opportunities zones?
We do not. And again, I emphasize that just because that is what we are hearing. It's why they do, it's why those opportunity zones were created in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So do we study the East End site and compare it to the 2012 study of the other site?
And that's if you want to do that, then we'll have to figure out how to pay for it. Like Scott said, we can find $4,000 or $5,000 even through economic development or someplace. But, and then we have to choose where you want the phase 2 to happen so that we can utilize the money that we got from the state of Maryland. But that's up to you. That's something you guys have to decide on.
I guess I kind of meant phase 2, the East End site, since we already have phase 2 of.
You can't use the study from 12 for the site downtown. You can't do that. It's a totally different
Well, it's a different downtown than it was in
Yeah,
2000.
and a
Well,
different
I
more
understand, I
atmosphere.
importantly-
It's
understand.
More
different.
importantly, the state won't use that, they need Maryland Stadium Authority stuff.
How many visitors are, I can't remember, an average at the Sun Stadium per year?
Did you have 140 last year? 140.
I just want to bring up that the Boutique Music Center in Hoover Heights averages 95,000 a year at their 12 events. Just
And if
throwing
you,
that out there.
and Rodney's going to make sure that everybody gets a copy of the 2012 study, so you can see the attendance increase that's estimated on a very conservative number of a facility that's located in downtown. It's a multi-use. Again, but things have changed since 12. You can't even look at that. And Kristen's right. We don't, property values, I'm sure, have changed also. So we need to either make a decision to do a phase 2 at a site. And that's a site that you guys have got to decide on your own where you want it to be. And where you have, you know, again, I don't know if the state will allow us to do a phase 2 on the Mill Street site, but if the Maryland Stadium Authority comes back and, you know, comes back with the phase 1 and says it scores better than downtown, then maybe they will. I mean,
Why
I guess they
wouldn't they?
would.
The money wasn't for a specific site, the money was for a study.
The money wasn't for a specific site?
No, we
I
haven't
thought it
picked a
was
site
for
yet.
a site chosen by the Maryland Stadium Authority. I don't know.
Is that in the language?
Again, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, at the very minimum, I think staff would need to talk to the appropriate players in this thing and find out whether there would be support for that.
Right.
Because again, if we're the only entity that supports that site, then we're out on our own again.
Yeah.
If we get a feedback that says, yeah, you know, that site would work, we think this site's better, I personally am not convinced it does for downtown what we want it to do though. But if there's an interest and it can be shown to be done for no city
Yeah.
taxpayer money, then
I mean, there were a lot of concerns with this site previously, environmentally, with traffic, and now with the trail, which we have all talked to Michelle about how the trail is financed, which you can clearly see there's no space for it here. What are we gonna do about that? I mean, aren't there
The
questions?
trail's already in there. The trail's in this drawing that you have in your hand.
Right, and we have to dig it up, which has to be addressed.
Doesn't look like there has to be a whole lot of movement from it.
There's gotta be a lot.
There's gotta be movement, yeah, without a doubt.
Aren't those conversations we should be having, though? Are the consequences of things like that financially? And like CRS is right there, I mean, we're gonna have an ambulance, right, there's a lot of variables in this site that cause problems.
And to me, in my train of thought, that would be part of the requirements that a phase 2 study, if on this site, would have to say. Yes, in the opinion of, you know,
In the preliminary design.
yes,
deliverable.
as part of the preliminary design, they're gonna see that there's a trail there. What do we do with that? What, does that
'Cause
have
you know
issues
who
with our
suffers
bond, with the
financial
bond?
consequences of that is the city of Hagerstown.
Right. But we're not gonna know that until we get that information.
But we know for sure if we build a stadium there, the trail has to come up and it, at the minimum, be relocated. We know that for sure. There's
Okay.
no way possible.
No, I mean, you would
to-
have to move the trail, without a
Right.
doubt, yes. You would have
And
to.
we suffer the financial consequences of that. I just think that's
The
something. that we
project
need to be
suffers the
taking-
financial consequences.
Okay.
I mean, isn't that true, though? The project would suffer the financial consequences?
And we
They're
would
the ones
definitely
that would have
suffer
to
it
move
if it became a change of use for that trail. We would definitely do it. I don't know that we know that is what the case would be until we would get a ruling either from our bond council or based upon the design of the site. Am I right, Michelle?
Because it, all I will say is because it's tax exempt, any movement or digging it up or building something around it and leasing out to private or selling will have consequences. Just depends on which way you go and what the
So if we leave it as a cultural trail that connects one end to the other, from downtown to the city park, but but we're not leasing it to any other entity, and we're not giving it to any other entity.
But if you leave, if there is nothing unturned in this section of the trail where you plop the stadium, just say, nothing, then by building something around it that is no longer necessarily like a trail, it's 24/7, there's other things to consider.
If it's
So
still
all
open
of that
20,
has
if
to
it's
go
still
back.
open 24/7,
So
the way it
all
is
of that still
currently.
has to go back to our bond council. Anything that happens there that is different from what the city currently owns.
Gotcha.
Any change in ownership, any change of use, any change around it, even if we dig up a rock. I'm not saying it can't be overcome, I'm just simply saying bond council will be involved and there will be definitely complications and additional dollars to consider for that, that's all.
Okay.
Is that something that that we can include in the site study?
Yes, absolutely.
Like how
Yeah.
much, what
Oh,
the
that would be a
ramifications
requirement.
are of that?
One of the
Absolutely.
deliverables that they would have to,
Right.
they would
Right.
have to
Why wouldn't you?
identify the financial
Okay.
impact.
And if you would, if that's the way you would decide to go forward, we would not even enter into an MOU to do a phase two unless you all approved what was going to be part of that phase two. We would bring that to you.
But what we should decide to try to save some time anyway, is whether we give a nod of approval to have staff put together the MOU in the parameters of what we would look for us to then look at and make a decision on whether or not we want to move forward on that MOU. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, the staff has got to put together the parameters with MSA on what an MOU is going to look like before we ever vote on it.
I think all of us also want to have the East End site. looked at.
That's fine, yeah.
I don't, well, maybe not all of it. I mean, is that going to happen? I think, I
You
mean,
know,
have that
and-
conversation too, because you just said you'd like to see it
A
explored as well.
conversation I would like to have with MSA.
It's how they reach the conclusions they reach in the matrix.
Not only that, but also along Kristen's, Councilman Alshire's line of thought as to how much would they rely on the 2012 information to incorporate into a 2019 study? If they come back and say, hey, we don't need to do an environmental study, that was done, not much changed, we're not going to do that. We have to do a traffic study. I disagree with some in here that I think they probably do need to do another traffic study because of the change in the makeup of the downtown with the UIP and with the Barbara Ingram School. I actually think they need, maybe they won't, then I'm wrong, that's fine. What else do we need to incorporate in that we can use from 2012? If they look and say, there's just too much for us to present to you an accurate study of an accurate result of what a phase two would be, we can't use any of 2012. Then
It's
that,
going to be definitely a larger cost.
that would be a larger cost associated to it. But those are things we don't know until we know.
So I think we need to have that conversation with MSA. And I
Can we
think
leave that to Rodney and Scott to have that conversation?
I think so, yeah, and I think we should provide you with any specific questions or specific things that we want tagged into this if we go ahead with a study.
Right.
I mean, they may come back and say, hey, all bets are off, we're not doing the study under these parameters that you set forth.
And they say we're looking at a cost of $600,000,
Yeah.
we would go, what? So, yeah. Well, so do we or do we not have Scott and Rodney get with MSA and figure out some of this information? Yes or no?
I'd say yes.
I'd say yes.
I just want to make sure that this boutique music center is not forgotten, that we are making sure that it is, that a sports arena and a multi-use stadium, however you want to say it, is the right project for our community.
One thing I don't know that something that looks like that I don't think if that's a city project, as Lou said, if that would be a city project, I don't know that something $20 million like that would be doable. I think something along the lines of what's in Raleigh, North Carolina, or Charlottesville, Virginia, that is also covered, but I think was less expensive to make, would be something that Michelle and I would have to look at as far as what could be done
And
to achieve that.
And one of the things that Jessica at the Maryland Theater had mentioned is that it would need to be at least 4,000 seats or more in
Because
order
they
to
only
not,
have 1,279.
in order to not compete.
Right.
again,
Well, you
just
could do
to-
it on, you could put that on Hospital Hill.
Above.
That would be great, wouldn't it? Looking out over the mountain. So are we, so we're gonna, I got two people who say yes, have Rodney and Scott contact MSA and put together
Yes.
some parameters.
I'm gonna
Work
start.
with Dan Spedden and anybody else who has information on what it should look like. I mean, I don't know what it will look like. I have no
Are we
idea.
just skipping the East Baltimore Street? How are we gonna handle that?
Well, we have to decide if you guys wanna spend money to.
Well, why don't we just ask the question first, if they are gonna back off on some of the other requirements because they did it in 2012.
And we may be able to save some money there and pay for it out of that 300,000.
Well, that's what my original.
Can
Yeah.
we?
I-
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
I-
That was my
it's worth
original.
I think, and I'm not gonna speak for all the staff that has worked on this in this room, but I know from my point of view, not only as where I sit, but also living here for so long, I see what the East End has become and what it is, not has become, but is now. I really think, if not for this project, for some project, we need to look at doing something out there. I do, so. How that's done, I don't know, but
I got an idea about that too, so we can.
I think that part of town needs a spark. As a gateway to the city, I think it needs a spark.
I agree.
And you know, like I said, if we can, you know, if we can, we find that $5,000 to at least do that part of it, pending that we know what the methodology is going to be, or we work with MSA to try to come up with this phase two, including.
Matrix.
I'd love to,
I'd like to
love
find
know
out that too. I'd like
Just
to know
the
what-
techie in me would like to know, whenever I see a methodology done, I sure like to know what the, you know, how
Yeah, how do
subjective
you
is
get
it?
there? Right.
How you get there.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like to read the formulas in the spreadsheet.
If that's, sometimes that's what it takes.
All right, so we should be able to get some kind of number back from MSA on what a cost might look like.
I'm
What
good
kind of
to-
time frame do you think?
I'll have
2
to ask
weeks?
them. I'll have to tell them.
3 weeks?
I'll have to ask them.
Yeah, just find out, yeah, inquire about that, that way
Mm-hmm.
we'll have some kind of idea when we're gonna talk about it again.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Anything else on this subject, guys?
Oh, my gosh.
City administrator?
Hang on one sec, real quick. Just a couple of things. City Park Summer Concert Series on Saturday, the 20th, at the band shell. The Freddie Long Band, Pop and Rock, will be there. Check out HagerstownMD.org for more information. Also, tomorrow, we're starting meetings with the county regarding the water sewer policy and syncing up the city and the county comp plans as much as we can. We start those meetings tomorrow. One other thing real quick, and since I think Travis is still here, I met a good friend of mine I played college baseball with who's high up in the Kansas City Royals organization, that actually attended a game at Municipal Stadium as part of his job. He mentioned to me that when he was on the field, that it is one of the best kept playing surfaces that he has been on in all minor league baseball, and he's been in pretty much all of them. So I want to, as much as I hate to compliment Travis on anything, especially Brian Sadler,
Yeah, Brian Sadler, come on, man.
because I know Travis had absolutely nothing to do with
Nothing to
it.
do with that.
I just want to, you know, I know Municipal Stadium gets beat up pretty bad, and, but at least as far as that goes, to hear that coming from Larry on the playing surface, I thought was something that should be publicly known. So that's all for me,
Brian's
Mayor.
very dedicated to that, so, yeah. Kudos to Brian Sadler. Shelley?
So first, I want to publicly thank Mike Kiefer for inviting us and encouraging us to go to Hagerstown, Indiana. It was very interesting, and he has a true passion for the sister city relationship. So thank you, Mike. Learned quite a bit. I know that we talk about, economic development and all the things that we're trying to do to encourage foot traffic and such, but I had an extremely disturbing phone call from one of our citizens here in Hagerstown. And he gave me permission to say what I needed to say, basically because he feels like he is already in jeopardy. He purchased a house through the Hagerstown Housing Store, 15 years ago. Hagerstown Housing, yeah. And the drug activity and the things that are going on in the house next door to him, which is a duplex. He is afraid to go outside and garden. He has a young daughter that comes home from college and is afraid to take their disabled son outside. The house has been raided several times. It is owned by someone that is apparently a dealer, and they cannot locate him. And rather than going into all of the scary details, I think that that's something that we have to figure out how to address in some way, shape, or form, because it can't be, our police force is, limited due to staffing. Somehow, some way, Martinsburg is figuring it out day by day, but we as a government entity have to figure out what in the world to do with these problems. And it's, when someone is crying out to we have to figure it out on a local level. This gentleman is ready to go and speak to the state, to speak to his delegation. He's very concerned, and I know that it goes on, and we all know that it goes on, but it's just something that we don't talk about. And I think we have to talk about the very serious issues that we have with landlords that are not here, not present, whether they're in other parts of the state or, it's extremely concerning. And I promised him that I would talk about it tonight, and I think that whatever that means that we have to do as a council in order to figure out how to make it more difficult for these things to occur. Because with economic development, stadiums and music centers and all those things, they all sound fantastic. But if we don't get to the core of our problems, we're never gonna get ahead, ever. And I can give more information to the chief on this particular property, or,
Can you give it to me too?
Yep.
please?
Yeah.
yep,
Please share. That it?
that's it.
Luke?
Nothing, thank you, everybody.
Austin?
Nothing to add.
Kristen?
Nothing.
Emily?
Nothing.
Yeah, me either. Great, we're adjourned.
So where's that?